There is a bird living almost everywhere humans have built a city. It stands on statues in Rome, walks through crowded streets in New York, circles railway stations in London, gathers around markets in Delhi, and nests beneath bridges in almost every major urban center on Earth. Most people barely notice them anymore. We call them pigeons. They are noisy, they leave droppings on buildings, they gather around train stations, steal scraps of food, and seem almost impossible to remove. But pigeons were not always city birds. Their global spread began with something much stranger: humans. The modern city pigeon is descended primarily from the rock dove, Columba livia, a bird originally associated with cliffs, rocky coastlines, caves, and mountains across parts of Europe, North Africa, and Western Asia. Then humans began building something that looked remarkably similar to the pigeon's natural habitat: buildings. Stone walls, towers, bridges, churches, warehouses, and apartment blocks gave pigeons artificial cliffs almost everywhere people settled. A balcony could function like a ledge, a bridge could resemble a rock face, and a railway station could provide shelter from predators and weather. Cities also offered something even more valuable: food. This relationship began thousands of years ago when ancient civilizations discovered that pigeons were unusually easy to keep. They could live around human settlements, find food independently, and return reliably to the same nesting location. People began constructing dovecots specifically to house them. Pigeons became livestock, providing meat and eggs, while their droppings were valuable fertilizer. Their remarkable ability to navigate also made them useful as messengers. But humans didn't simply tolerate pigeons. We deliberately transported them. As civilizations expanded, pigeons traveled with them. Ships carried birds across seas, merchants moved them between cities, soldiers transported them across territories, and settlers brought familiar animals to new continents. Pigeons came along. This became the beginning of a global transformation. A bird that once occupied a relatively limited natural range gradually became one of the most geographically successful urban birds on Earth. During European expansion, pigeons were transported to North America, Australia, South America, Southern Africa, New Zealand, and countless islands. Every new settlement created another opportunity. A new town meant new buildings meant nesting sites, and human settlements produced enormous quantities of food waste. Pigeons are specialists at exploiting exactly that. A dropped piece of bread, grain spilled near a warehouse, food discarded beside a restaurant, trash around a market, or birdseed in someone's garden can become a meal. To a pigeon, the modern city is not necessarily a hostile environment. It can look like a giant feeding station surrounded by artificial cliffs. And that explains why killing pigeons rarely solves the problem. Remove pigeons from one location, and the food remains, the shelter remains, and the nesting sites remain. Other birds can eventually move into the empty space. The city itself continues producing the conditions that support them. The problem isn't simply that there are too many pigeons. It is that urban environments can be extraordinarily favorable to pigeons. Their reproduction makes the situation even harder to control. Under favorable conditions, pigeons can raise multiple broods in a year. Their nests are simple, usually requiring little more than a few twigs placed on a sheltered ledge or protected corner. The eggs hatch relatively quickly, and young birds develop rapidly. When food and nesting locations are abundant, the reproductive cycle can repeat again and again. This gives pigeon populations the ability to recover after significant losses. But reproduction is only part of their success. Pigeons are also remarkably effective navigators. For centuries, humans have been fascinated by their ability to return home from unfamiliar locations. Messenger pigeons were used during wars because they could travel long distances and reliably return to their home loft. Scientists believe pigeons use several navigation systems, including visual landmarks, Earth's magnetic field, odors, and possibly low-frequency environmental signals. The exact combination is still being studied, but the result is obvious. A pigeon doesn't need a human map to find its way home. That ability became one of the reasons humans spread pigeons so effectively in the first place. Eventually, some escaped domestication, others were deliberately released, and many simply moved into cities where food and shelter were abundant. Once established, they no longer needed humans to survive. The pigeon population we see today is therefore not simply a collection of abandoned farm birds. It is a highly adaptable urban population. Cities provide warmth, buildings protect nesting sites, streetlights extend the usable hours of the day, garbage provides food, parks provide water and vegetation, and enormous amounts of human infrastructure create thousands of potential nesting locations. Predators still exist, but buildings can provide pigeons with protected spaces that are difficult for many predators to reach. Humans themselves unintentionally protect pigeons. Every time a city produces food waste, leaves buildings with accessible ledges, or maintains structures containing sheltered cavities, it creates opportunities for pigeons. The bird is simply taking advantage. That is why calling pigeons an invasion can be misleading. They are not invading cities in the same way an army invades a country. In many ways, the city is inviting them. Humans build the habitat, provide enormous quantities of food waste, and then attempt to remove the animal that adapted perfectly to both. This creates an almost endless cycle. Cities install spikes on buildings, stretch nets across ledges, use visual deterrence, improve waste management, restrict feeding, and sometimes trap birds. These methods can work locally, but unless the underlying resources disappear, pigeons can return. Block one ledge and they search for another. Cover one roof and they move underneath a bridge. Remove food from one location and they search another. Their success comes from flexibility rather than dependence on a single habitat. There is also a common misconception that every pigeon is a major disease threat. Pigeons can carry pathogens and parasites, and large accumulations of droppings can create sanitation problems, especially when dried material becomes airborne. But simply seeing or walking near pigeons does not mean a person will automatically become sick. The bigger concern is concentrated populations around food preparation areas, ventilation systems, buildings, and heavily contaminated spaces. In other words, the challenge is real, but the bird itself is not some unstoppable biological weapon. The deeper story is much more fascinating. Humans didn't accidentally create the modern global pigeon population overnight. We transported pigeons, bred them, fed them, protected them, and built environments that resembled their natural habitat. The same bird that once nested on Mediterranean cliffs now nests on skyscrapers. The same species once associated with rocky landscapes now occupies subway stations. The same animal humans once raised for food became an urban scavenger. And the strangest part is that much of this transformation was caused by us. Today, pigeons exist on multiple continents, thousands of kilometers from the places where their ancestors originally evolved. They crossed oceans without having to fly across those oceans themselves. Humans carried them. Ships carried them. Trade carried them. Cities carried them. And modern transportation continues to connect pigeon populations around the world. So can we stop them? Individual populations can certainly be reduced. Cities can make buildings harder to nest on, improve waste management, restrict public feeding, reduce food sources, and use professional wildlife management methods. But eliminating pigeons globally is an entirely different challenge. Their populations are distributed across millions of buildings, parks, bridges, farms, ports, and urban spaces. There is no single nest to destroy, no single colony to remove, and no single country controlling their survival. The pigeon survived because it learned something few wild animals have mastered: how to live with humans. We changed the planet, and pigeons changed with it. We built cliffs out of concrete, and they moved in. We created enormous amounts of food waste, and they learned to eat it. We connected continents, and they traveled with us. After thousands of years of domestication, transportation, and accidental habitat creation, the pigeon has become one of the most familiar birds on Earth. So the next time you walk through a city and see dozens of pigeons surrounding a sidewalk, don't just see a nuisance. You're looking at the result of one of the most successful human-animal relationships in history. Except somewhere along the way, the relationship changed. Humans stopped keeping the pigeons. But the pigeons never stopped living alongside us.